First on WGRZ.com and on Channel 2. Thanks for joining us for this special report here on WGRZ Plus. I'm Kelly Dudzik. At any moment, we expect to hear from Buffalo Mayor Sean Ryan following the release of internal affairs documents first obtained by Two on Your Side. The records detail who knew what and when, the night of a crash involving Erie County Narcotics Chief DJ Granville. This is a live look at the mayor's office where he's expected to address those findings, which you saw first here on Channel 2. The documents show the current Buffalo Police Commissioner was contacted the night of the crash. According to those records, Granville's sister-in-law, Lucia Escalin, called Craig Macy, who was chief of detectives at the time, shortly after she arrived at the scene. 2 on Your Side's Nate Benson was first to obtain those documents. He joins us live now from City Hall. Good morning, Nate.
Yeah, hey there. Good morning, Kelly. As you can see behind me, it's a packed room here on the second floor of City Hall in the mayor's office. We're anticipating Mayor Ryan coming out momentarily to discuss the release of the Granville files, those internal affairs files that we first told you about yesterday. And the big revelation in those thousands of pages of documents that we obtained is that the current Buffalo Police Commissioner, Craig Macy, was contacted that night by Lieutenant Lucia Escalin just shortly after midnight. Now, that crash happened just after 11:30 on April 11th, 2024. A lot of revelations in these documents. We saw that DJ Granville, the Erie County Narcotics Chief, actually called Lieutenant Escalin just after that accident, letting her know where he was and where the crash was, and that he was involved in a crash. And that happened, according to the records, at about 11:42 p.m. on April 11th. At 12:01 a.m., Lucia Escalin, the lieutenant at the time, reached out to Craig Macy. At the time, Craig Macy was the head of detectives, the chief of detectives rather, for the Buffalo Police Department. And they spoke 2 times just after midnight on April 12th, discussing this. Now, we've been told, we sat down with Craig Macy yesterday, Commissioner Macy, and he talked about how this was just a professional to professional call. She was seeking advice on what to do in the situation, what tickets should be issued, what should happen with the damaged Erie County vehicle. Now, at the time, Craig Macy was not her supervisor, but more of a mentor-mentee relationship from what I'm told and what I was told by Commissioner Macy. So it's one of those situations where there's a lot to unravel here. We sat down with Craig Macy yesterday, and he kind of talked quite in depth, almost for a half hour, about this situation. Now, he testified to the internal affairs investigator that he's known DJ Granville for about 6 or 7 years and considered him a friend. Here's a little bit of that back and forth between me and Commissioner Macy about that. You also testified and shared with IA that you consider DJ Granville a friend. Mm-hmm. Did that at all, do you think, play into a role that's why Lieutenant Escalin called you? She knew you're a friend of his, give you a call?
So I can't speculate on why she called me. I can tell you that the vast majority of supervisors in the city have my number. The vast majority of supervisors call at all times, right? Like last night, for instance, there was a guy that was going to jump off a building, and I got a phone call asking if there's anything else that should be done. Just kind of, right? I'm still available in this position. With respect to DJ, right? I've had a lot of interactions with him in previous jobs, right? There is professional friendships, I guess you could say, and again, looking back, I'm well aware of the appearance. Part of the point of even sitting down with you is to just lay this out, because in my opinion, when you don't address things, it allows for speculation and then further speculation and people to insinuate things, right? So I have, again, a professional friendship with him, and I don't know. I don't know if that was part of it or just the fact that a lot of people call me.
Now, according to the phone records that we obtained from those documents, Lucia Escalin and then Chief Macy called each other, texted each other numerous times between midnight and noon on April 12th. Now, as you just heard Commissioner Macy talking about, part of their plan is to talk about this, right? That's why they sat down with us yesterday. On his first day as mayor, Sean Ryan pledged to release these documents. We're here today. We're still standing by waiting for him to come out and address the media for this. But transparency has been a big key. And I spoke to Commissioner Macy about the transparency of all this. Take a listen.
The mayor wants transparency. These files were turned over immediately, right, to the Corporation Council. They're in the process of doing all of the redaction, right? I'm sitting here, I could say, you know, here's the files, you guys read through it, you can make your own determinations, right? You're hearing it from my mouth that this is what happened, this is why some of these things happen. I understand the appearances, but you know, I think we're moving in the right direction. There was clearly some things that were lacking, right? And those policies were changed.
If I'm reading between the lines of what you said a moment ago, you know, things could have been handled differently maybe last year. Are you suggesting, you know, former Commissioner Wright should have spoken more about, you know, the way things were handled and try to get in front of that public trust side of things?
What I will say is that there was a lot of opportunities, right, that some of these narratives could have been addressed, right? And when you have something, you have now it's three police commissioners that are still talking about an event that was 2 years ago, and it was arguably probably the biggest news story in 2025 for the city of Buffalo. There is opportunities, right? And one of the things that you know, I hope everybody learns is that especially when elected officials or the media is talking about stuff and maybe there's incorrect narratives, I understand. When there's an open investigation, you can't lay it out, right?
As you heard from Commissioner Macy just there, obviously they are very aware of the appearance of all this, right? And as these files get examined by not only Channel 2 News, but other members of the media here in Buffalo, and there's going to be a lot more stories that come out of this. As you just heard, you know, he said this came across from 3 different police commissioners. I did press Commissioner Macy about whether or not did he inform then Commissioner Joseph Granville about this, and he said he did not. He did not escalate this to any other person in the Buffalo Police chain of command that night or afterwards. And I even said, you know, did this even come up in like the Monday morning meeting, right? You know, over coffee or something, kind of casually. And he says, nope, I never once told Commissioner Granville about this incident. And Macy actually retired from Buffalo Police in August 2025, but was brought back on by the Ryan administration in an acting commissioner capacity. And you know, regarding some of the things we found out in the transcripts from some of these files, you know, Chief Macy, Commissioner Macy rather, you know, talked to the internal affairs investigators. You know, Lucia Esquilin specifically told Macy that night that it was DJ Granville involved in that crash. That was one of the first things that she told him. And you know, so again, this kind of who knew what and when is kind of the chain of command here. We're still waiting for Mayor Ryan rather, to address the media. We were just told that it should be momentarily now. You know, one of the other big topics of conversation is, you know, why wasn't there a DUI test done on scene? And I asked, you know, Chief Macy, you know, since he was sought for advice by Lieutenant Esquilin that night of the crash, you know, did he advise her, hey, you know, conduct a DUI test? He says he did not advise that. Based on the information he had that night, it was described as a property damage accident only. Now granted, 7 vehicles were involved between Jersey and Prospect on Buffalo's west side, a widespread crash, but he did not advise, given the nature of the information he had, he did not advise Lieutenant Esquilin to provide a DUI or any type of intoxication test on scene or afterwards. One of the interesting things we learned from these documents too is that Lieutenant Esquilin drove DJ Granville from the scene to the Hyatt Hotel just after 1 in the morning from that scene. So that was another interesting tidbit from the files that we did not know beforehand. She actually took him to the Hyatt Hotel, and that's where he was throughout the day. Now, she was not the first officer on scene. There was several other officers on scene before her. She was at her district office when she was contacted by DJ Granville, and then she went and dispatched herself to the scene of that crash there on Prospect, New Jersey, on April 11th, 2024. Some of the other, you know, interesting tidbits in the files. Again, there's thousands of pages of documents that, you know, we're still culling through and trying to learn more. The big piece of information was that Chief Macy was contacted that night. So we do have this connection now that someone from Buffalo Police chain of command was notified shortly thereafter. I mean, the crash happened just after 11:30 at night on April 11th. Chief Macy, chief of detectives at the time, was notified just after midnight, and then, you know, the scene kind of wrapped up just after 1 a.m. You know, again, Chief Macy at the time said he didn't feel this needed to be escalated. One of the things we found out in the files, the 911 lieutenant on scene that night who manages Buffalo Police resources during emergencies, was not notified that a Erie County Sheriff's officer was involved in this crash. The duty officer that night was not notified by Lieutenant Esquilin. So even though Chief Macy was not her direct supervisor, she reached out to him. She did not reach out to her direct supervisor or anybody else in her chain of command that were on duty that night. Chief Macy testified to Internal Affairs that he was sleeping and was awoken by a phone call from Lieutenant Esquilin. So again, this is one of those, we're finding out a lot more of the pieces of this puzzle that we just didn't know. Now, almost 2 years after this investigation, we're still standing by waiting for Sean Ryan, but you can see the full media room here inside City Hall. Everyone is here. As Chief Macy said in our interview, this was probably the biggest story in Buffalo in 2025, and Sean Ryan pledged to release these documents on January 1st. It was one of the first questions I asked him, and here we are almost 2 months later. They're finally releasing these thousands of pages of documents. One of the interesting aspects of this is Mayor Ryan was critical of the Scanlon administration for wrapping up the investigation on December 30th. Now, on December 30th of 2025, we saw 5 police officers disciplined, many of them receiving suspension, but Lieutenant Esquilin was demoted to a detective sergeant. And I spoke to Commissioner Macy about that yesterday, and he says the public might not think that that's a big deal, but it's a very big deal. He, off the top of his head, he said a Buffalo police officer has not been demoted in that regard in almost 25 years. So, this was a very significant disciplinary action brought forth as a result of the actions that happened that night of the crash, the subsequent internal affairs investigation, and then the discipline on December 30th. But certainly, it was one of those situations where, Mayor Ryan was not necessarily thrilled with the way the investigation was handled, which is why he pledged transparency. And on his first day after being sworn in as Buffalo mayor, promised to release those files as soon as he could. And now here we are 2 months later, finally being able to see them. We have part of our full story that we aired yesterday. We want to show that to you right now.
It's been nearly a year since Two on Your Side Investigates broke the story about Erie County Sheriff's Office Narcotics Chief DJ Granville crashing his county-issued work truck into 7 parked vehicles on Buffalo's west side just before midnight on April 11th, 2024. That story led to an internal affairs investigation, disciplinary action against 5 Buffalo police officers, Granville pleading guilty to reckless driving and leaving the scene of a property damage-only accident, and public scrutiny about a potential cover-up of the entire incident by Buffalo police. Two on Your Side has obtained the full Buffalo Police Internal Affairs investigation files related to the DJ Granville case. They include more than 2,100 pages of documents, more than 24 audio recordings, and some of the body-worn camera footage from the night of the crash. The first 911 call about the crash was made just before 11:40 on April 11th, 2024.
911, where's your emergency?
One of his tires was already gone. It's a truck that just came down our street and hit a lot of cars. It's a car up on the curb. It's a pickup truck. I'm on Prospect. And the wheel is off the car, and he was blowing it down the street.
Lieutenant Lucia Esquilin responded to the scene shortly thereafter. She was at her police district office at the time. Internal affairs files show that Granville, Esquilin's brother-in-law, called her at 11:42 p.m. According to Esquilin, he was, quote, telling me where he was and that there was an accident. After they hung up... Sorry for the delay, folks.
Mayor Sean Ryan is now addressing the media regarding the release of the Granville files. Let's take a listen.
Good morning, everybody. When I ran for mayor, I made a commitment to the people of the city of Buffalo. I promised that this administration would operate differently. I promised transparency. I promised accountability. The DJ Granville saga was a public example of the city failing on both counts. On January 1st, I stood here and pledged the release of all Buffalo Police Department's internal affair files related to the incidents. Since early January, our law department has spent over 200 hours combing through those files. We are talking about more than 3,200 pages, and in addition to that, 12 hours of audio recordings. It was painstaking, time-consuming work as the Corporation Counsel's office made sure that witness information, identifying information was not released to the public inadvertently and that people's names were protected. I want to thank the law department for their tireless work to allow us to release every document to the public before the end of February. Lots of pages, to go through, and this does not count the 12 hours of audio recordings. As of this morning, all the files are publicly available through the city's FOIL portal. Today is about giving the public access to information that, after all, belongs to them. Anyone can go to the city's FOIL portal and search this. Go to the portal, put in case number 26-207, and review every file. Anyone can draw their own conclusions about how the Buffalo Police Department handled this incident and the subsequent investigation. I myself have not reviewed the full content of this release before the files were released to the public. It was important to me that we get every file published as soon as possible, and that is out to the public today. I did not want there to be any perception that this administration was filtering or shaping in any way the documents that we released today. Everything that was in the file is out on the website right now. With that in mind, I'm not going to offer any conclusions today about the substance of the investigation. In the coming weeks, we're going to do a deeper dive and review the entire disciplinary process and determine what changes we need to make to strengthen accountability and transparency and rebuild public trust. We're going to make sure we don't make the same mistake twice. In just 2 months, under the leadership of Interim Commissioner Craig Macy, the Buffalo Police Department is already doing things differently. We saw that commitment to transparency reflected in the handling of the situation regarding Officer Woods. The department acted with the understanding that a lack of transparency erodes public trust. We took quick disciplinary action, and we put the entire timeline out for the public to see. No more hide the ball. In recent weeks, Commissioner Macy has also implemented new policies to dictate how officers must conduct themselves. In January, the police department updated its rules and regulations to create a clear conflict of interest policy. It forbids any officers from participating in actions where personal relationships could compromise or even appear to compromise their objectivity. It requires disclosure, recusal, and a written documentation. The department also updated its policy governing interactions with outside law enforcement agencies. If an officer becomes aware of an alleged misconduct involving a member of another agency, supervisors and internal affairs must now be noticed immediately. These are important changes, and they're just the beginning as we continue to work on modernizing and rebuilding the public trust with our police department. I thank Commissioner Macy for the work that he's done so far to improve the department and set the next commissioner up for success. Does anyone have any questions?
Why is Commissioner Macy still in his job since he was involved?
Could you identify yourself, please?
Dan Higgins from the Buffalo News. Do you still have confidence in him? Has he offered to resign?
This is like a four-part question, Dan.
Yeah, okay. So is Commissioner Macy offered to resign, and do you think he should still be in his job?
That's the question you want to ask, Dan?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Commissioner Macy has been forthcoming from the start. You will see when you review the files, the information that's in there.
I reviewed the files, and you just said you didn't.
I have a timeline of the files, and I have a glossary of the files, and it said that there is a IA investigation, or Commissioner Macy was on an audio file in revealing exactly his interaction that night. So Commissioner Macy told our transition team and our interview team forthrightly about his communications on that evening. Everything he said is collaborated by the internal affairs interviews that I've been briefed on. He understands the appearance, but I'm satisfied that he acted appropriately based on the information that he received that evening. I thought Commissioner Macy was the best person to do this job, to get us through this transition period, and so far he has exceeded expectation. But it's very clear that he revealed this information to the transition team very, very early on in the process. He laid the cards on the table.
What about Granville's sister-in-law, Lieutenant Esquilin? Her and the other officers that are involved in this, why have they not been fired?
The answer to that is because on December 31st, less than 24 hours before I took office, the issue was disposed of and closed. And I have no ability to go back and look at that action. But boy, it is quite suspicious that they closed the file a day before I took office. So the previous administration, that was the actions they took, which leads me to have no ability to go back and discipline any officers. But what I will do is go back and do a complete review of the disciplinary process and how we ended up in this unfortunate position.
Several council members have suggested reaching out to outside law agencies, including the Attorney General. Have you had any discussions with any outside law agencies about any independent investigations?
I mean, the Granville matter is closed right now, so you can't go back. So, by the action on December 31st, they put a period at the end of the conversation. So no more Niagara County DA investigation, no more Buffalo Police investigation. They closed it and said, this has been adjudicated and you can't go back. It's a double jeopardy system, so we can't go back.
That, though, you say the public can make up its mind by reading these files. A lot of people see evidence of public corruption. The Niagara County DA did not choose to prosecute that, but considering the mountain of evidence that exists now, wouldn't it be in the public interest for the Attorney General's office to see if public corruption crimes were committed here?
That's up to the Attorney General. If they want to use their resources to come in and investigate that, I'd be very happy if they did that. But I'm going to control what I can control, and we're going to set up a process to review how we got here in this situation, noting that I cannot go backwards and discipline officers. That was closed on December 31st. But what we can do is review the entire process, right? Nobody thinks this was a good process. Nobody thinks justice was served. Nobody thinks that the city and the police department were transparent. We can't change that, but we can go forward and try to rebuild the public's trust by creating a system, that is more transparent.
Do you think that that'll work? I mean, what's done is done. A lot of people were very disappointed in the outcomes.
You know who was very disappointed in the outcome on December 31st? Me, because it took away my ability to actually look at this case and to figure out who was wrong, what was done wrong, and to then initiate and prescribe disciplinary proceedings. So that was taken away from me, and I'm sure the public sees it the same way that I do, is that was intentionally closed to prevent a fresh, open, transparent, and accountable look at this saga.
Who do you think intentionally closed it?
Who do I think closed it?
Intentionally closed the file?
Well, it was closed by the acting mayor on December 31st. It's clear who closed it. There's no mystery there.
How many officers do you think actually cooperated with the Internal Affairs investigation?
It should be in the index.
Mayor, I know that you control the city of Buffalo and your administration. This file shows that the Erie County Sheriff's Office did not comply with records requests from Internal Affairs. What is just your reaction to that for a law enforcement agency not to cooperate with such an important investigation?
It's a big, stinky mess. None of it looks good. None of it makes the public think that if there was malfeasance or nefarious actions on any officers, that it would actually get an honest look. Remember, why do we need this transparency and accountability in law enforcement? Because law enforcement is entrusted by the public to enforce laws. They enforce laws from speeding tickets to domestic violence to major crimes. But we can't have this perception that the laws don't apply to law enforcement. And that's what the public is left with this Granville saga. Two different policing agencies, Niagara County District Attorney. Truth hasn't come out.
Mayor, who do you think is responsible for the death of Mr. Arlano? As news broke yesterday, and Detective Richard
Oh, and before let's hold, does anyone, yeah, any other Granville questions?
I know I came in a little hot.
You did come in a little hot, Mr. Higgins. I accept your apology.
I do apologize for that. Could you please be more clear about, did Mr. Macy offer his resignation?
No, Mr. Macy didn't offer his resignation because the information you're hearing today is not new to me. I knew this information before I asked Commissioner Macy to be the commissioner. He was very forthright through the transition process. You know, this information is in this internal affairs file, and I think you should release it. And I'm in there. And here's how I'm in there. You know, he explained that because of the lack of accountability in the rank and file of the police department over the last year, that when officers needed questions answered, the rank and file, the brass wasn't answering the phone calls. So he said his phone often rang after midnight because he was one of the only few people with rank who are actually doing their jobs and accepting phone calls. So that's why we moved on from the last commissioner. So the last commissioner was told, you can't be commissioner after December 31st. You know, we needed to make big changes because the police department, for this period of time between Gramalia and January 1st, was not operating in any sort of productive manner where they had a policy from the top of how to act under certain circumstances, but also what is the goals of the Buffalo Police Department. So for a long time, officers were just left to fend for themselves. And that's when I brought Macy on. You know, I knew exactly his interactions. He was frank on that. But I was convinced then, and I am convinced today, that he is the only person who could have come in and stepped into the breach of being an interim commissioner, and he's done a great job. Mind you, most people only want to be interim commissioner if they think it's going to give them a leg up on becoming the commissioner. He was straight from the start. I'll come in, I'll fill this gap. It's going to be rough, but I'll do it, but I don't want to be commissioner. So, you know, I have great respect for the commissioner, but I have also great respect that he laid his cards on the table right away. So none of this was a surprise.
Mayor, do you have any update on the search for a new commissioner?
I do. So we've contracted with an outside search firm that's doing a national search. Just this week, they narrowed that field down to 4 candidates. I have to review now those 4 candidates and figure out, you know, for myself, none of them are from Buffalo, but how to, you know, communicate and go through the second and third round of interviews. But I am happy to report that, you know, a lot of applications from all around the country, and that the field is whittled down to 4 candidates.
Considering the implication that this wasn't really handled well from the then acting mayor's office, with these policies and new things that you're putting in place in the police department, do you think that those will be able to sustain progress under different leadership whenever you leave this office?
My first step is to bring the police department into a predictable organization. I want the Buffalo Police Department to be known throughout the state as the best trained, most professional law enforcement agency. And that's what I'm going to work through for my term in mayor. But the more you can cement in normal, modern practices, those don't go away when the mayor changes. So, you know, we want to professionalize the department, bring it in to the new century, and I'm confident that those changes we make will become the institution and will become the muscle memory of the department, and will not allow it to backslide.
Mayor, on the issue with the interim commissioner, when he was chief of detectives, he had the 12-minute phone call with then Lieutenant Lucia. He advised her to write a ticket and have the vehicle impounded. Did not bring up the clear conflict of interest that it was her brother-in-law that she was, you know, writing the ticket to. Did he tell you that that was a mistake and advocate for the change in policy?
He told me that unbelievably, there was no policy saying you can't be the responding officer on your relative. Like, there's no policy or rule against that in the Buffalo Police Department, which is unbelievable. But those were the rules in effect on that day when that phone call was made.
And so he advocated then to change it?
He advocated to change that, and now we have a clear policy that has a conflict of any personal relationships or that could compromise or appear to compromise must do two things. You must disclose it at the time. You must recuse yourself from involvement in that investigation. But most importantly, you have to have a written paper trail of saying why. And then the second thing we did is changed how we are working with outside agencies. So in that instance, I believe people supposed there was irregularities with how the sheriff's department was conducting themselves. But now there is a straight rule that if you see those irregularities, you must report them. There's a mechanism now to say, I saw something that shouldn't have happened, and now there's rules saying you have to report that and say what you saw it happen. Before, there was no mechanism to do it.
Michael, and everybody, we could share the updated stuff from, well, BPD said that a lot. On topic, so we ready to move on to
Mayor, Mr. Alam, who is
Well, we're still on topic.
Why should residents of the city of Buffalo trust the Buffalo Police today in any way that a city resident may interact with police? Well, I don't want to editorialize, but I'll just leave my question there.
I would say, there's hundreds of members of the Buffalo Police Department. A small handful, were involved in this situation. This situation was made worse by not having clear leadership during this incident. But there's a lot of very good, dedicated members of the Buffalo Police Department. This incident has shook people's faith and trust. You regain that by changing your standards, changing your rules, then executing over time. So I am confident with the changes we're going to be putting in place and the leadership, the consistent leadership that we're going to have, that we will rebuild the public's trust. But that's up to us to rebuild that public's trust. We can't say to the public, just trust us today. We have to show them that we deserve their trust, and I intend to do that. And I am confident that the hardworking members of the Buffalo Police Department, the men and women who go out there every day, they are doing a good job. We got to make it easier for them to do a good job. But when there are outliers, when there are problems, we need to investigate it fully, regardless who is involved, regardless of who's related to who. All that's off the table. So from now on, everyone gets treated equally in the city of Buffalo, whether they're in law enforcement or not in law enforcement.
There was one more on topic from Nate, then we'll move on her out.
There was about a dozen 911 calls that night, and officers that responded knew that there were multiple vehicles involved, but it never escalated to a watch commander, duty officer. Escalent only called the off-duty, her friend Chief Macy. Should there be a policy in place where you're getting a lot of 911 calls and it seems like the situation has scaled up, there should be some sort of automatic process where a watch commander, duty officer responds to the scene no matter what?
Look, the communication between the watch commanders, the rank and file, as demonstrated in the Woods situation, it's not great, and that's what we're trying to improve is the communication between the rank and files, the lieutenant, and the watch commanders. Some of that is direct policy, but the other part is training. You have to know how you react in every situation, not based on the past situations, but how are we supposed to? So I'm confident that with the proper training, incidents like this, it won't happen in the future. But they're only not going to happen in the future if you have a mayor who is committed to making sure trust and accountability, the two hallmarks of policing, are enforced. And I intend to do that, Nate.
In the interest of time, moving us along the off topics.
All right, Mayor, Mr. Alam, devastating news yesterday, him being found dead. My question to you is, who's responsible for his death, and what is your reaction to Detective Richard High apparently closing the case for a period of time before he was found?
So a few things. So we're going to put together late morning, early afternoon, a timeline of the Buffalo Police Department's investigation from from the first 911 call.
As you heard just there, a lot of information to go through. Sean Ryan, Mayor Ryan, said 12 hours of audio, 3,200 pages, which is about 1,000 more than I was able to get. 200 hours were spent by the law department to sift through these files and get them ready for the public. There's a lot to go through. Sean Ryan, Mayor Ryan, says he still supports Commissioner Chief Macy. We're going to have a lot more on this big story coming up today at 4, 5, and 6. But for now, on your side, inside City Hall, I'm Nate Benson. Back to you.
All right, appreciate it. Thank you, Nate. And thank you for joining us for this 2 on Your Side special report. The news continues now on WGRZ Plus right here, and we'll see you back here for Channel 2 midday, also on Channel 2. You can also continue following this breaking story and watch our full reports and investigations into the DJ Granville case on our website, WGRZ.com.